parent who puts the child in a microwave and those types and we see that as abuse and neglect. But there's so many other forms of abuse and neglect that go unnoticed, you know, to the untrained eye for a kid that comes to school, for example.
As a matter of fact, I think that was the best example that you could think of, Dr. Russell, when we talk about neglect, because every teacher who watches children come into his or her classroom can determine which child is neglected simply by looking at that child. You can tell whether a child is well-groomed, the way the child speaks, everything in reference to the child. You can and so in a real sense, it's just the human experiences that are not passed on by the caregiver to the child. And anytime those human experiences are not passed on, then that child is what? Considered to be neglect.
I watched, they had a training on traumatic brain injury, and it was surprising that some forms of neglect and abuse has such an effect on normal brain activity and functioning. You know, a child not, you know, withholding fruit from a child, how it can actually affect that child later on in life.
Oh, yes.
You know, withholding love, you know, and just really nurturing, withholding that nurturing mother or father type of connection with that child can actually affect certain brain activity to where the child grows up with these holes, where they, you know, then they start looking for other things to fill those holes.
Well, when you deal with, Doctor, your clients, how do you bring them in to deal with them? I mean, how do they come to you and say that I've neglected my child, or are they sent to you by somebody? I mean, how do you get in touch with these?
Normally, I know up front that they've been, they're coming to me as dependent neglect, because that's the way that the referrals come into me, and it states that they're dependent neglect, and it kind of gives me, you know, an overall view of what type of neglect the child has been subjected to. And so when I'm working with that child, the first thing I try to do is to gain their trust. Because one of the things that children need to know, especially kids coming from abusive environments, is that they can trust the people that have some control over their lives. You know, because when you look at a child who's been abused by his mother or his parents, that child has zero trust with any other adult. Because if the person who brought me in the world is not going to take care of me, the stranger certainly ain't going to do it. So then you've got to take time to build the trust. Trust is essential. Dr. Nicholas Hobbs talked about trust being essential in the relationship between a child and a parent, or a child and an adult. And then once you can gain that trust, you find out what their deficits are, you know, whether they need to help it. And then you start working with that child on